Hey people, it's me again. So, anyways, it's now the holiday season again, and so it's like the peak travel season, where if we're, you know, reaching our holiday destinations, whether it's by, you know, car or plane or train. Yeah. So, anyways, I had talked about this sort of thing before, you know, as far as that goes. The first time I flown on a plane was back in '89 when I was 7 and I hadn't even turned 8 yet, and it was going to Chicago, and it was like a 2 o'clock flight in the afternoon, and that was back when uh, John Wayne didn't have the new terminal yet. They were just already doing like the finishing touches on constructing, which is now the current terminal. They just still had like the original terminal, and then it was like how how when you see like these movies or TV shows where they had uh the old little sandwich board marquee things that they had, for the flights, and then they had like the old fashioned um baggage claim carousel, like, you know, as far as that goes. And um, I think, if I recall correctly, we didn't have like that MD-80. I think we had like that MD-80 or MD, one of those where they didn't have uh, a in-flight entertainment thing there. Although I think they did have like the 737s or one of those other ones, but back then when it came to in-flight entertainment, you had to like crane your neck up like this or like this, and in order to watch like the little monitors that they have hooked up to the the aisle there. And it wasn't until a little bit later on when they started to have the more individualized um, in-flight entertainment, where it's just like in the rear seat backs like that. But one of the other changes that they had, like when it came to like American or United, and I think it was even Delta, where they were doing away with it, but they just had, because of the fact that a lot of people have their own little tablets and all that, and so we could like put our little tablet on the seat back, and then like have our own little, you know, Netflix and or YouTube or whatever it is you want to like watch within reason and all of that. You know. And then of course the other thing, like the in-flight meals, was another thing. Because back in the day, we did have like some kind of in-flight meals depending on the durations of the flight. Because I remember uh, one time it was like it was probably on our flight to Chicago, or I might have been on the flight back, and where I had chicken cordon bleu. Yeah, so that was one of the things that I can't remember. And then I did have like this one of those chicken sandwiches, like that was on the flight to Chicago back in '01. You know, and then the in-flight um, movie at that time was like Shrek, and then the flight back was that I think it was someone like you, that was like that whole Ashley Judd and Hugh Jackman uh, rom com movie there, but and then back then it was like American had like CBS in flight where it was they would have clips of Everybody Loves Raymond, and then they had clips from uh, what was that show like um, 60 Minutes, but it was one of those light stories, you know, and then a couple of other stuff, but then if I recall correctly, I think it was like you know United had like their kind of in-flight entertainment, and it was something like NBC in flight, so they probably had like any of their of the NBC shows that they would have small clips of, you know, whether it was from Friends or something like that. But I don't know if Delta or one of the other ones had like ABC in flight or Fox or something like that. You know, but it wasn't until a little bit later on when they started having like the more individualized ones, because I didn't even remember way back in '05 where JetBlue had like, you know, direct TV in flight, but then there was something a little bit later where even United or some of the other ones had live TV through them. So it's interesting as far as the technology there. And it's also interesting that, you know, the newer planes, you know, with the longer ranges were, you know, where there could be flights from here to Sydney, but then they could have one where it's like New York to Sydney or London to Sydney in one single trip like that, instead of stopping over like in LA or something like that. But then there could also be ones that also be like here to here to Cape Town, South Africa in one go, instead of having to fly to London and then to Cape Town or something like that, or fly to JFK to Cape Town or something like that. Yeah, so that's like one of those little things there. And I even remember there was even like some gaming lounges that was like over in LAX. Like I think at least on two of the terminals that had something like that. You know, so that was like another thing that people can do to kind of unwind before they travel and all that. You know what I mean? So, considering all that, I think I would also have the other stories there. You know, when it came to um, all that, and one was like back when I was living in Irving, Texas. So there were a couple times where I flew back and forth from here to Dallas, and I think it was like had like a couple of like the MD-80 planes where there was no uh the only in-flight entertainment was like radio. You know, they didn't have any like in-flight movies, and then we did have like an in-flight movie going like to and from Dallas, because we were on like a 737 plane, and it was like A Night to Remember one, and there was the movie Elf was the other one, and then I think that was it. But other than that, I hadn't even flown on a plane, in 20 years, so I have absolutely no idea, as far as what is going on with all that. So, and not to mention the fact that when it came to all the different airlines that were around, like 10, 10 years ago, I mean, not 10, maybe like 15 or 20 or 25 years ago, that are not there because of mergers, acquisitions, and whatnot, whatever it was, like, you know, US Airways, Continental, um, Northwest, or TWA, um, Pan Am, and Western, Eastern, and then like Vanguard, National, ATA, AirTran, and all the ones that kind of also faulted because of whatever like decisions in. So that's just one of those little things again. So, anyways, I guess that's probably it. So, talk to you guys later.